Mark Donovan's life was a masterpiece of precision. His apartment, a testament to meticulous organization, featured color-coded bookshelves and a refrigerator where condiments were arranged by height. His morning routine never varied. Alarm at 6:30, shower for exactly 7 minutes, breakfast, 2 pieces of whole wheat toast, 1 egg, black coffee, and departure at 7:45 to arrive at Baldwin Financial Services by 8:15. Even his proposal to Sarah had been planned with military precision. Dinner reservation made 3 months in advance, ring hidden in the chocolate soufflé, and speech rehearsed 37 times. In 3 days, he would marry Sarah Bennett, his girlfriend of 4 years. She was everything he'd ever wanted: kind, reliable, practical. She accepted his peculiarities with affectionate tolerance, never mocking his need for order or his aversion to spontaneity. Their relationship was comfortable, predictable, safe. The wedding would be tasteful but modest. The honeymoon, a week in a well-reviewed resort in Maui, had been booked 11 months ago. Their life together stretched before him like a well-marked path. A house in the suburbs within 2 years, children, too, ideally, starting after their 3rd anniversary, retirement accounts growing steadily in the background. Sometimes, in the quiet moments between sleep and wakefulness, Mark wondered if this was truly all he wanted. These thoughts were fleeting, quickly banished by the reassuring rhythm of his routines. Adventure was overrated, he told himself. Unpredictability led to chaos, and chaos was to be avoided at all costs. It was Tuesday evening, and Mark was reviewing the seating chart for the reception one final time. Sarah had left an hour ago after they'd confirmed the final head count with the caterer. The apartment felt peaceful, the silence broken only by the soft ticking of the wall clock and the occasional car passing on the street below. His email pinged. A new message appeared in his inbox from an unfamiliar address, Stellar Sisters at incomprehensibleStringOfCharacters.com. The subject line was blank. Curious, he opened it. The body contained only an alien emoji and 2 words: "Be ready." Mark frowned, then deleted it. Probably spam or a poorly conceived marketing campaign. He returned to his seating chart, making a minor adjustment to avoid seating his Aunt Patricia near the bar. That's when it happened. First, a strange quality to the light filtering through his windows, a shift from the warm orange of sunset to something cooler, more violet. Then the silence. Not just quiet, but an absolute absence of sound, as if someone had pressed mute on the world. No clock ticking, no distant traffic, no hum of the refrigerator. Mark stood, throat suddenly dry. He moved to the window and pushed aside the curtain. The street below was frozen in an unnatural tableau. A jogger mid-stride, a dog with paw raised, a car seemingly suspended in motion, all perfectly still. And above the small neighborhood park across the street, hovering silently, was something. Not a helicopter, not a drone, not anything Mark had ever seen before. It was sleek, silver blue, roughly oval in shape, but with elegant, flowing curves that seemed to catch and bend the light around it. There were no visible propulsion systems, no engines, no rotors. It simply hung there, maybe 30 feet above the ground, utterly silent. As Mark watched, transfixed, the craft descended slowly, touching down on the grassy area with impossible gentleness. A seam appeared in its smooth surface, widening into an opening from which emerged a soft, pearlescent light. 2 figures stepped out. Even from his second-floor window, Mark could see them clearly. Women, or at least they appear to be women. Identical in every visible way. Tall, slender, with an unusual fluid grace to their movements that seemed almost choreographed. Their features were striking. High cheekbones, large almond-shaped eyes, elegantly arched brows. Their hair, a shade that shifted between platinum and pale lavender depending on how the light hit it, was worn long and straight. Their clothing was unlike anything Mark had seen. Garments that seemed to flow around their bodies like liquid silver, neither dress nor suit, but something altogether different, with geometric patterns that glowed faintly against the metallic fabric. Most disconcerting of all, they were looking directly at his window. At him. Mark stepped back quickly, heart hammering in his chest. This couldn't be real. It was a hallucination, a dream, a bizarre prank. Perhaps a movie was being filmed. That would explain the strange craft, the odd lighting, the frozen scene below. His doorbell rang. Mark stood rooted to the spot, unable to move, to think. The doorbell rang again, a perfectly normal, everyday sound that seemed absurdly incongruous with the situation. This isn't happening, he whispered to himself. This isn't real. The doorbell rang a third time, followed by a soft, musical voice from the other side of the door. Mark Donovan, we know you are there. Please open the door. We mean you no harm. Moving as if in a trance, Mark crossed his living room. His hand hovered over the doorknob for a moment before he turned it, pulling the door open just a few inches, chains still engaged. They stood in his hallway, even more striking up close. Their eyes were the most unsettling feature, larger than human eyes should be, with irises of shifting violet and blue that seemed to contain pinpoints of light, like stars in a twilight sky. Their skin was flawless, with a subtle luminescence that made them appear to be lit from within. What do you want? Mark managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Who are you? The one on the left spoke, her voice melodic with an accent he couldn't place. I am Lyra. This is my sister, Vesper. May we come in? What we have to discuss is not for hallways. Discuss? I don't. What is this? Is this some kind of joke? The sisters exchanged a glance. The one on the right, Vesper, tilted her head slightly. No joke, Mark Donovan. We have traveled very far to find you. Please allow us entry. Time is complicated. Mark hesitated, then closed the door, unhooked the chain, and reopened it. He stepped back, allowing them to enter. As they passed him, he caught a subtle scent, something like ozone after a lightning strike, mixed with an unfamiliar sweetness. Is this a prank? He asked, watching as they surveyed his apartment with curious eyes. Did Jake put you up to this? Because if this is some crazy bachelor party thing. We do not know this Jake, Lyra said. She moved to his bookshelf, examining the spines with interest. Your organization is impressive. You value order and predictability. Vesper had drifted to the window, looking down at the still frozen scene below. We have temporarily shifted your immediate environment out of your normal temporal flow. It was necessary for privacy. Mark laughed, a short, nervous sound. Right. You've shifted my temporal flow. Look, whatever this is, movie promotion, performance art, elaborate prank, I'm not interested. I'm getting married in 3 days, and I have a lot to do. Yes, your wedding. Lyra turned from the bookshelf. That is precisely why we are here. Mark felt a chill ripple through him. How do you know about my wedding? Vesper turned from the window. Perhaps we should explain from the beginning. That would be great, Mark said, gesturing to his sofa. Please sit down and tell me exactly what this is about. The sisters sat, their movements so perfectly synchronized it was unsettling. Mark took the armchair opposite them, perched on the edge, ready to bolt if necessary. Lyra spoke first. We are not from your world, Mark Donovan. We come from a system you have not yet discovered, orbiting a star you call Epsilon Eridani, though that is not our name for it. Mark stared at them. You're claiming to be aliens. If that term helps you understand, yes, Vesper said. Though we prefer interstellar travelers or simply visitors. Right? Mark nodded slowly. And I'm supposed to believe this because you saw our vessel, Lyra said matter-of-factly. You observed the temporal pause we initiated. You can see that we are not exactly like you. Costumes, special effects, CGI. Mark shook his head. Try again. Vesper sighed, a surprisingly human gesture. She reached into a concealed pocket in her flowing garment and withdrew a small, translucent cube. She placed it on the coffee table between them. Observe, she said simply. The cube began to glow from within. Then, impossibly, it rose into the air, hovering a foot above the table. It expanded, its surfaces rippling like water, until it was roughly the size of a basketball. Within its depths, images began to form. Stars, planets, vast swirling nebulae, all moving in a hypnotic dance. As Mark watched, speechless, the view seemed to zoom in on one particular star system. A yellow-orange star with 7 planets orbiting it. The image focused on the third planet, a world of breathtaking beauty, with twin moons and rings similar to Saturn's, but more delicate, more colorful. Our home, Lyra said softly. Astria, the world from which we come. The image shifted again, showing cities unlike any Mark had seen, structures that seemed to grow organically from the landscape, with soaring, impossibly thin spires and buildings that appeared to float above the ground. Gardens grew vertically up the sides of structures, and water flowed in artful patterns through and around the architecture. This is impossible, Mark whispered. No, Vesper said gently, merely unknown to you. Until now, the cube contracted, the images fading, until it was once again a small, translucent object. It descended to the table, coming to rest exactly where it had started. That could still be some kind of advanced hologram, Mark said, but his protest sounded weak even to his own ears. Would you like more evidence? Lyra asked, her tone suggesting she had expected this resistance. We can provide it, though time is precious. Mark swallowed hard. Let's say, hypothetically, that I believe you're visitors from another world. Why are you here? Why me? The sisters exchanged a glance, some unspoken communication passing between them. Lyra nodded slightly, and Vesper turned to Mark. In our culture, there's a process we call the binding. It is difficult to translate precisely into your language, but it is somewhat analogous to what you would call marriage, though much more profound and complex. The binding is not merely a social or romantic construct, Lyra continued. It is a fundamental aspect of our biology, our spiritual development, and our society structure. When we reach a certain stage in our lives, we must complete the binding or face consequences. What kind of consequences? Mark asked, finding himself drawn into the conversation despite his lingering skepticism. Physical decline, mental instability, eventually death, Vesper said simply. It is not a choice for us. It is a biological imperative. Okay, but what does this have to do with me? Mark asked, a sense of unease growing in his stomach. Lyra leaned forward. The binding requires a partner with a very specific genetic, energetic, and consciousness profile. It is exceedingly rare to find compatibility even among our own kind. Many of us travel extensively, searching for compatible partners. We have been searching for over 20 of your Earth years, Vesper added, visiting hundreds of worlds, scanning millions of potential candidates. A cold realization was beginning to dawn on Mark. And you found me? Yes, both sisters said in unison. But that's... Mark stood abruptly, pacing across his living room. That's insane. I'm nobody special. I'm an accounts manager at a mid-sized financial firm. I collect vintage calculators and grow bonsai trees. There's nothing extraordinary about me. On the contrary, Lyra said, your consciousness pattern is exceptionally rare. The specific wavelength of your thought processes, the unique energetic signature of your neural activity. These qualities make you compatible with our species in a way that perhaps one in several billion humans might be. And we have done extensive research on you, Mark Donovan, Vesper added. Your need for order, your attention to detail, your ability to see patterns where others cannot. These traits align perfectly with the mental requirements for a successful binding. Mark stopped pacing, staring at them. So what exactly are you proposing here? That I bind with one of you? Instead of marrying Sarah? The sisters exchanged another look, and Mark felt his stomach drop. Not exactly, Lyra said carefully. In our culture, identical twins, such as ourselves, share a unique bond, Vesper explained. Our consciousness is both individual and connected. The binding must include both of us. Mark stared at them, uncomprehending for a moment. Then understanding crashed over him like a wave. Both of you? You're saying you both want to with me? He couldn't even finish the sentence. The binding is not primarily a physical union, though there's a physical component, Lyra clarified. It is a melding of consciousness, an exchange of energy, a sharing of essence. And in your culture, Mark said slowly, when does this binding typically take place? At the culmination of a ceremony that marks the formal beginning of the partnership, Vesper answered. What you might call a wedding night. Mark finished, sinking back into his chair. You're telling me that you've traveled across the galaxy to ask me to participate in some alien ritual with both of you on what is supposed to be my wedding night with Sarah? We understand this is unexpected, Lyra said, her tone gentle but firm. We would not ask if there were alternatives. Your compatibility is unprecedented, Mark Donovan. We have never encountered anyone like you. And this isn't. Mark fumbled for words. This isn't about love or sex or anything like that. Not as you understand those concepts, Vesper said. The binding transcends your human notions of romantic or physical love. It is a communion of consciousness, a sharing of energetic essence. It will expand your awareness, your understanding of reality itself. What happens after this? Binding? Mark asked. Do I go back to my normal life? Do you take me away to your planet? What? The binding changes all participants, Lyra explained. You would not be the same afterward, just as we would not. What path you choose after would be your decision, but you would have options unavailable to you now, including the ability to experience realities beyond your current perception. Mark stood again, moving to the window. The scene outside remained frozen, a constant reminder that this conversation was happening outside the normal flow of time, outside the bounds of his ordinary reality. This is too much, he said finally. I have a life here. I have Sarah. We've been planning our wedding for over a year. I can't just. We understand, Vesper said, rising. We ask only that you consider our request. The decision must be yours, freely given. How long do I have to decide? Mark asked, still staring out the window. The optimal alignment for the binding corresponds with the time you have set for your wedding ceremony, Lyra answered, also standing. 3 days from now. Of course it does, Mark laughed humorlessly. So either I go through with my wedding to Sarah, or I participate in your alien binding ritual. Those are my options. Yes, Lyra confirmed. Though we must emphasize that the consequences for us, should you decline, are severe. We will return tomorrow evening, Vesper said, moving toward the door, to address any questions you may have and to hear your decision. Wait, Mark called as they reached the door. What happens when you leave? Will time just start again? Yes, Lyra answered. The temporal shift will dissipate gradually over approximately 30 of your seconds after our departure. No one will remember seeing our arrival or our vessel, and you'll be back tomorrow? Just like that. We will return, Vesper confirmed. Rest well, Mark Donovan. You have much to consider. With that, they left, closing the door softly behind them. Mark stood frozen, staring at the door, half convinced he had hallucinated the entire encounter. Then he noticed the small, translucent cube still sitting on his coffee table, tangible proof that the visitors had been real. He moved to the window just in time to see them cross the street, entering their craft. The door sealed seamlessly behind them, and the vessel rose silently into the darkening sky. It hovered for a moment, then vanished with a subtle ripple in the air, like heat rising from summer pavement. True to Lyra's word, the scene below gradually came to life. The jogger completed his stride, the dog's paw touched the ground. The car continued its journey down the street. The sounds of the world returned. Clock ticking, refrigerator humming, distant traffic. Mark sank onto his sofa, the alien cube cool beneath his fingertips, his mind spinning with impossible choices. Sarah called an hour later, her voice a welcome anchor to normality. She was discussing final details for the rehearsal dinner, asking if they should add an extra table for his cousins from Boston who had unexpectedly confirmed their attendance. Mark found himself responding automatically, making appropriate noises of agreement or consideration while his mind remained fixated on his visitors and their extraordinary proposal. He nearly jumped when Sarah asked if everything was all right. Fine, he assured her quickly. Just tired. A lot on my mind with the wedding so close. I know, she said sympathetically. It's overwhelming. But just think, in 3 days it'll all be over, and we'll be in Maui with nothing to worry about except which beach to visit. Right, Mark said, guilt washing over him. Can't wait. They spoke for a few more minutes before saying goodnight. Mark sat in the growing darkness of his apartment, the cube glowing faintly on the table before him, casting strange, shifting shadows across the walls. Sleep, when it finally came, was filled with dreams of stars and twin moons and cities that floated above the ground. Morning brought no clarity. Mark went through his routine mechanically, shower, breakfast, commute, but his mind was elsewhere. At work, he stared at spreadsheets without seeing them, responded to emails without registering their content. Colleagues commented on his distraction, attributing it to pre-wedding jitters. If only they knew. The day dragged endlessly. By the time Mark returned to his apartment that evening, he was exhausted from the constant internal debate. He had just opened a beer when the doorbell rang exactly at 7 o'clock. They stood in his hallway looking exactly as they had the previous day, though their flowing garments were now a deep blue with silver accents. "You returned," Mark said unnecessarily. "We said we would," Lyra replied, her head tilting slightly in what might have been confusion at his statement. "May we enter?" Vesper asked. Mark stepped aside. As they passed, he noticed again that subtle scent of ozone and sweetness. Once they were seated, same positions as before, with eerie precision, the temporal shift occurred again. Mark felt it this time. A subtle ripple in the air, a momentary pressure in his ears, and then that absolute silence as the world outside his apartment froze. "I have questions," Mark said, remaining standing. "A lot of questions." "We anticipated this," Lyra nodded. "Please, ask. First, why me? Really? There must be someone else compatible who doesn't have a fiancé, who isn't days away from getting married." "Compatibility for the binding is extraordinarily rare," Vesper explained. "It requires an exact match of certain neurological patterns, genetic markers, and consciousness wavelengths. We have searched extensively, and there's truly no one else?" Mark pressed. "In the entire galaxy, we have found 17 other potential matches during our search," Lyra admitted. 3 were already deceased when we located them. 9 were unsuitable due to severe health issues or advanced age. 5 declined our proposal. And none of them worked out? The ones who agreed. The matches were imperfect, Vesper said, a note of sadness in her voice. The bindings initiated but could not be completed. The consequences were unfortunate. What happened to them? Mark asked, a chill running through him. Their minds could not fully integrate with the binding, Lyra explained. They experienced mental fragmentation. In your terms, they went mad. We were forced to restore them to the best of our ability and return them to their worlds with their memories altered. "Jesus," Mark whispered, "and you think I'll be different?" "Why?" "Your compatibility rating is significantly higher than any previous candidate," Vesper said. "The probability of successful completion is 97.3%, compared to less than 60% for our previous attempts." "What exactly does this binding involve?" Mark asked, pacing again. "You've been vague about the details." The sisters exchanged a glance. "The complete process is difficult to explain in your language," Lyra began. "The binding occurs in 3 phases. The first is physical proximity and cellular resonance, a process by which our bodies align their energetic frequencies. The second is consciousness melding, a temporary but profound sharing of thought, memory, and perception. The third is essence exchange, a permanent connection that allows ongoing awareness of each other across any distance. And this happens. How exactly? Mark pressed. There is physical contact, Vesper elaborated. Not unlike your human intimacy, though with significant differences. Our bodies contain sensory nodes that, when activated, facilitate the energetic exchange. The physical aspect serves as a conduit for the deeper connection. So, it is sexual, Mark said flatly. It incorporates elements that you would classify as sexual, Lyra acknowledged. But its purpose and experience transcend physical pleasure. It is a sacred act of creation and transformation. Mark ran a hand through his hair. "And what about Sarah? My fiancée, the woman I'm supposed to marry? What am I supposed to tell her?" "That is your decision," Vesper said gently. "We cannot advise you on how to manage your human relationships." "Great," Mark muttered. "Very helpful. Perhaps it would assist your understanding if we showed you more about our world, Lyra suggested. About the nature of the binding and what it truly means. Before Mark could respond, Vesper retrieved the cube from where it still sat on his coffee table. This time, when it expanded and began to glow, the images that formed within it were different. Mark saw what appeared to be a ceremony, being similar to Lyra and Vesper, though with variations in appearance, gathered in a circular space beneath an open sky. At the center stood 3 figures, forming a triangle with their bodies, their hands joined. As he watched, the 3 began to glow, first subtly, then with increasing brightness. The light emanating from them shifted through colors Mark had never seen before, hues that seemed impossible, that made his eyes water and his mind struggle to process what he was seeing. The light expanded, enveloping the 3 figures until they were no longer visible as individuals, just a brilliant, pulsing core of radiance. When it finally faded, the 3 stood transformed, their features subtly altered, their eyes containing new depths, their bodies seeming more substantial and yet somehow less solid at the same time. "This is the binding," Lyra said softly. "A transformation of essence, a joining of souls, a transcendence of individual limitations." The image shifted again, showing the aftermath of the ceremony. The newly bound trio moved through their world with an otherworldly grace, interacting with technology that responded to their thoughts, communicating without words, perceiving aspects of reality invisible to others. "The binding grants abilities beyond ordinary existence," Vesper explained. "Enhanced perception, extended lifespan, access to dimensions, and energies normally beyond reach. It is evolution accelerated and directed." "And you think I would gain these abilities?" Mark asked, fascinated despite himself. "Yes," both sisters answered simultaneously. "The humanistry in binding has never been fully completed, but our simulations suggest the benefits would be shared, though perhaps expressed differently in your physiology." The cube contracted, its light fading. Mark sat heavily in his armchair, mind reeling with the implications. "What if I refuse?" he asked finally. "What happens to you?" "Without the binding, our physical and mental systems will begin to deteriorate," Lyra explained, her voice calm despite the dire content of her words. "The process is not immediate, but it is irreversible. Within approximately 5 of your Earth years, we would experience complete neural collapse." "You die," Mark translated. "Yes," Vesper confirmed. "But this must not influence your decision unduly. The binding must be entered freely, with full consent and commitment. Coercion undermines the very foundation of the connection." Mark stood and walked to his kitchen, retrieving his abandoned beer. He took a long swallow before turning back to them. "I need time to think," he said. This is impossible. You're asking me to choose between my fiancée, the woman I love, the life I've planned, and saving your lives by participating in some alien ritual that will change me forever. How am I supposed to make that choice in 3 days?" "We understand the difficulty," Lyra said, rising. "We will return tomorrow evening for your final decision." "What happens if I agree?" Mark asked suddenly. "Practically speaking, do we do this? Binding. Here? Do I go with you to your ship? To your planet?" "The binding would take place aboard our vessel," Vesper explained, also standing. "The environment must be precisely controlled. Afterward, you would have a choice. Return to Earth, perhaps with altered memories to ease your transition back to human life, or accompany us to continue exploring the expanded consciousness the binding provides." "And if I choose to go with you, would I ever come back?" "That would be your decision," Lyra said. "Travel between worlds is complex, but not impossible. You could return for visits, or permanently if you found yourself unsuited to interstellar existence." Mark nodded slowly, trying to absorb this information. "Tomorrow, then. I'll have an answer for you." The sisters moved to the door with that unsettling synchronicity. Just before leaving, Vesper turned back. "Mark Donovan," she said softly, "regardless of your decision, know that your existence has brought hope to ours. That alone is a gift." They departed, and gradually, the world resumed its normal flow around Mark's apartment. He finished his beer in 3 long swallows, then reached for his phone. He needed to see Sarah. An hour later, they sat across from each other at a quiet corner table in their favorite Italian restaurant. Sarah looked beautiful in a simple sundress, her dark hair pulled back, her smile warm but increasingly concerned as the meal progressed. "Mark, what's going on?" she finally asked, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "You've barely said 10 words since we got here, and you're looking at me like you're trying to memorize my face or something." Mark startled, realizing she was right. "I'm sorry," he said, squeezing her hand. "I've just got a lot on my mind." "Cold feet?" she asked, her tone light, but her eyes searching his. "No," he said quickly. "No, nothing like that. Just work stress and wedding details. Everything's under control," she assured him. "The venue called today to confirm all the arrangements. Your tux is ready for pickup tomorrow. The rings are safely with your best man. All we have to do is show up and get married." Her smile was so genuine, so full of love and excitement for their future, that Mark felt physically ill with guilt. "Sarah," he began, not knowing what he was going to say, but feeling he had to say something. "Do you ever wonder if there's more out there? Things beyond our normal experience?" She tilted her head, considering. "Like what? Religion? Spirituality? More like other realities, other possibilities for what life could be. Things we can't even imagine from our limited perspective." "I guess I don't think about it much," she admitted. "I'm pretty focused on the life right in front of me. The real one, with you and our future together." She paused, studying his face. "Mark, you're scaring me a little. What's going on?" He forced a smile. "Nothing, really. Just pre-wedding philosophical musings, I guess. Ignore me." She didn't look convinced, but she let it go, turning the conversation to more practical matters. Last-minute wedding details, their honeymoon plans, the apartment they'd be moving into together after returning from Maui. Mark tried to engage, to be present, but he couldn't stop seeing the images from the cube, the glowing trio, the transformation, the abilities that came after. What would it be like to transcend normal human limitations? To perceive realities beyond the visible spectrum? To connect with consciousness across vast distances? And what would it mean to leave Sarah behind? To abandon the life they'd planned together? The guilt was crushing, but alongside it grew something else. A yearning for the unknown, for the extraordinary possibility being offered to him. As they said goodnight outside her apartment building, Sarah's kiss lingered. "Just 2 more days," she whispered against his lips. "And then forever." Mark held her tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume, feeling the warmth of her body against his. "I love you," he said, meaning it completely. "Never doubt that." She pulled back slightly, searching his eyes. "I don't doubt it. But something's wrong, isn't it?" He hesitated, then nodded slightly. "I have a decision to make. A difficult one. I can't explain it now, but I promise I'll tell you everything soon. Whatever it is, we can figure it out together," she said, touching his face gently. That's what partners do. Her unwavering faith in him, in them, only made the weight of his decision heavier. Mark slept poorly that night, his dreams a chaotic swirl of wedding ceremonies that transformed into alien rituals, of Sarah's face morphing into Lyra's, and then Vespers, of stars falling from the sky and burning holes through the fabric of reality. He called in sick to work the next day, something he'd done perhaps 3 times in his entire career. He needed space to think, to weigh his options, to make an impossible choice. He spent hours pacing his apartment, arguing with himself, making lists of pros and cons that seemed absurdly inadequate for the magnitude of the decision before him. Stay with Sarah, normalcy, love, stability, the life he'd planned. The comfort of the known. Go with Lyra and Vesper. Adventure, transformation, expanded consciousness, abilities beyond human limits. The allure of the unknown. But it wasn't just about what he wanted. There were ethical considerations that weighed heavily. If he refused the binding, Lyra and Vesper would eventually die. Could he live with that knowledge? Could he look at the stars each night, knowing that somewhere out there, Two beings were slowly fading because he had chosen his own comfort over their survival. And what about his responsibility to Sarah? They had made promises to each other, built dreams together. Abandoning her days before their wedding would devastate her. Could any experience, no matter how transcendent, justify causing such pain to someone he truly loved? By evening, Mark was no closer to a decision. When the doorbell rang precisely at 7, he felt a surge of anxiety so intense it was physically painful. Lyra and Vesper stood in his hallway, their garments now a deep purple with gold accents. Without speaking, they entered his apartment. The temporal shift occurred, the world outside freezing into immobility, and then they turned to face him, their extraordinary eyes watching him with an intensity that was almost palpable. "You have not yet decided," Lyra observed. It wasn't a question. "How could I?" Mark asked, his voice strained. "You're asking me to choose between my fiancé and saving your lives. Between the life I've built and something completely unknown. How does anyone make a choice like that? Perhaps we can help clarify the decision," Vesper suggested. "Would you be willing to experience a temporary connection with us? A brief glimpse of what the binding would offer?" Mark hesitated, then nodded cautiously. "What would that involve?" "Physical contact," Lyra explained. "Hand to hand. We would initiate a limited consciousness melding, enough for you to experience a fraction of the awareness the full binding would bring, but temporary and without permanent effects." "It would be safe?" Mark asked. "Completely," Vesper assured him. "We can control the depth and duration precisely." Mark took a deep breath. "Okay, let's try it." The sisters moved to stand on either side of him. "Extend your hands, palms up," Lyra instructed. Mark did as she asked. The sisters each placed one hand in his, their skin surprisingly warm, and with a subtle vibration he could feel through his palm. "Close your eyes," Vesper said softly. "Breathe deeply and evenly." Mark closed his eyes. For a moment, nothing happened except the continued vibration against his palms. Then, gradually, he became aware of a warmth spreading up his arms, across his shoulders, and into his chest. The warmth intensified, becoming almost electrical, sending pleasant, tingling sensations throughout his body. And then, his consciousness expanded. There was no other way to describe it. It was as if the walls of his mind, walls he hadn't even known existed, suddenly dissolved, allowing his awareness to flow beyond the boundaries of his physical form. He could feel Lyra and Vesper's presence, not as separate entities outside himself, but as consciousness intertwined with his own. Their thoughts, memories, and perceptions flowed into him, and as into them, gentle river of shared awareness. He saw their world, Astrea, not as images projected by the cube, but as lived experience. The feeling of twin moons rising over crystal spires, the sensation of swimming in oceans where the water itself seemed alive with consciousness, the taste of fruits that changed flavor with each bite. He experienced the complex harmonies of their music, which was composed not just of sound but of light and mathematical patterns that danced through the mind. Most overwhelming were the emotions, their longing for home, their fear of death without the binding, their genuine fascination with Earth and humans, their hope that Mark might be the one to complete their search. He felt their individual personalities more distinctly now. Lyra's analytical precision, her deep curiosity about the mathematical underpinnings of reality, Vesper's emotional intuition, her ability to perceive the energetic connections between all living things. And beyond these personal aspects, Mark experienced something far more profound, a glimpse of reality as they perceived it, colors beyond the human spectrum, flowing energetic fields surrounding all objects, the subtle vibrations that connected all matter, the layered dimensions that existed alongside the physical world but remained invisible to human perception. It was beautiful, terrifying, and utterly transformative. For those brief moments, Mark understood that what he had always accepted as reality was merely a narrow slice of what actually existed. Then, gently, the connection began to fade. The expanded awareness receded, the extrasensory perceptions dimmed, and Mark found himself back in his apartment, standing between the sisters, their hands still in his cheeks wet with tears he hadn't realized he was crying. That was... He began, but words failed him. A fraction, Vesper said softly. A mere glimpse of what the full binding would bring. Mark sank onto his sofa, overwhelmed. How can anyone go back to normal life after experiencing that? He whispered. Many cannot, Lyra acknowledged. Which is why the choice must be made with full understanding of its consequences. The binding is irreversible. Your perception, your consciousness, your very being would be permanently altered. Mark sat in silence for several minutes, processing what he had experienced. Finally, he looked up at them. I need to see Sarah, he said. Before I decide, I need to see her one more time. The sisters nodded in unison. We understand, Vesper said. We will return tomorrow evening for your final decision. The alignment will be optimal at precisely 8:47 p.m. your time, Lyra added. If you choose the binding, we must begin by then. 8:47 p.m., Mark repeated. The exact time our wedding ceremony was scheduled to begin. Yes, Vesper confirmed. The convergence is not coincidental. Certain patterns in space-time influence both your human ceremonies and our cosmic alignments. They moved to the door, pausing before exiting. Whatever you decide, Mark Donovan, Lyra said, know that the experience we shared today has already created a connection between us that will remain, in some form, regardless of your choice. After they left, time resumed its normal flow. Mark sat motionless for nearly an hour, his mind still reeling from the experience. Then he called Sarah. Can you come over? He asked when she answered. There's something I need to talk to you about. Now, she sounded surprised. It's almost 10, and I have my final dress fitting first thing tomorrow. Please, he said, his voice cracking slightly. It's important. There must have been something in his tone, because she agreed immediately. I'll be there in 20 minutes. When she arrived, Mark had composed himself as best he could. They sat together on his sofa, the same spot where he had sat with Lyra and Vesper only hours before. You're scaring me, Sarah said, searching his face. Is it about what you mentioned at dinner last night? This decision you have to make. Mark nodded, taking her hands in his. Sarah, if you could experience something extraordinary, something beyond anything you've ever imagined, but meant leaving behind everything familiar, would you do it? She frowned slightly. That's pretty vague, Mark. What kind of extraordinary thing are we talking about? I can't explain it properly, he said, frustration evident in his voice. Just imagine discovering that reality is so much more than what we see and experience every day. That there are dimensions, perceptions, forms of consciousness that we never access in our normal lives. And imagine being offered the chance to experience all of that, to evolve beyond normal human limitations. Sarah was watching him with growing concern. Mark, you're not making sense. Are you feeling okay? Maybe we should call Dr. Phillips. I'm not sick, Mark assured her. I've been presented with an opportunity, something incredible but terrifying. And taking it would mean... He paused, swallowing hard. It would mean not going through with our wedding. Sarah pulled her hands away from his, hurt flashing across her face. What are you saying? You want to call off our wedding because of some philosophical crisis? It's not a crisis, Mark tried to explain. It's a genuine opportunity. A door opening to something I never knew existed. What exactly is this opportunity? Sarah demanded, anger beginning to replace hurt. Is there someone else? Is that what this is about? Mark hesitated. Not in the way you're thinking. It's not about another relationship, not like ours. It's about evolution, transformation, becoming something more than I am now. You sound like you've joined a cult, Sarah said, standing up. Or like you're having some kind of breakdown. This isn't like you, Mark. You're practical, grounded. You plan everything. And now, 2 days before our wedding, you're talking about dimensions and evolution and walking away from everything we've built together. Mark stood too, reaching for her, but she stepped back. I know how it sounds, he said desperately. I can't explain it in a way that makes sense, because it's beyond our normal frame of reference. But I promise you, I'm not having a breakdown. I'm not on drugs. Seen something that changes everything. Sarah studied his face, tears welling in her eyes. Do you love me? Yes, Mark answered without hesitation. I love you. That hasn't changed. Then why are you doing this? Why now, Mark? 2 days before we're supposed to start our life together. Mark had no answer that would make sense to her. How could he explain Lyra and Vesper, the spacecraft, the temporal shifts, the consciousness melding? How could he make her understand what he had experienced when even he could barely comprehend it? I need time, he finally said. I'm not calling off the wedding. Not yet. I need until tomorrow evening to make this decision. Sarah wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. I don't understand what's happening, but I know you. You're a good person, Mark. You wouldn't hurt me without a reason. So I'll give you until tomorrow. But please, whatever you're going through, remember what we have. Remember the life we've planned. Remember that I love you. She left soon after, leaving Mark alone with his thoughts and the memory of what he had experienced with Lyra and Vesper. He didn't sleep that night, instead sitting by his window, watching the stars and wondering what it would be like to travel among them, to see them not just as distant points of light, but as living, breathing environments, each with its own consciousness, its own song in the cosmic symphony he had glimpsed. The next day, his final day of decision, passed in a blur. Mark moved through it like a sleepwalker, his mind constantly shifting between the concrete reality around him and the expanded awareness he had briefly touched. He picked up his tux as scheduled, confirmed details with his best man, went through the motions of preparing for a wedding he might not attend. Sarah texted several times throughout the day, each message a reminder of what he would be leaving behind. Just had final dress fitting. Can't wait for you to see it tomorrow. Venue called to confirm everything's set up. My parents just arrived at their hotel. They're so excited. Each message was a knife of guilt, but also a tether pulling him back toward the life he had planned, the safety of the known. As evening approached, Mark found himself standing in his bedroom, looking at the tuxedo hanging on his closet door. He ran his fingers along the sleeve, thinking of Sarah walking down the aisle toward him, of their first dance as husband and wife, of the children they might have had, the life they would have built together. Then he looked at his watch, 7:30 p.m. In a little over an hour, Lyra and Vesper would return for his answer. His gaze shifted to the window, to the darkening sky where stars were just beginning to appear. He thought of what awaited him if he chose the binding. Consciousness expanded beyond human limits, perceptions of realities normally invisible, abilities that would seem like magic to his current self. And he thought of the sisters themselves, their lives hanging in the balance, dependent on his decision. Could he refuse them, knowing they would eventually die? Could he live with himself if he said no? At precisely 7 p.m., the doorbell rang. Mark frowned, checking his watch again. It was too early for Lyra and Vesper. He opened the door to find Sarah standing there, beautiful in a simple blue dress, her expression a mixture of determination and vulnerability. I couldn't wait until tomorrow, she said. I need to know now. Are we getting married or not? Mark stepped back, allowing her to enter. Sarah, the timing isn't good. I'm expecting. As if on cue, there was a subtle shift in the light filtering through his windows, that now familiar violet tinge. The sounds of the world outside faded to silence. Sarah froze mid-step, her expression locked in place. What the? Mark stared at her immobile form, then spun toward the door as the bell rang again. When he opened it, Lyra and Vesper stood there, now dressed in ceremonial garments of shimmering silver with intricate patterns of light coursing through the fabric. You've initiated the temporal shift early, Mark said accusingly as they entered. Sarah's here. She's frozen. We detected her presence, Lyra explained. The conversation you were about to have would have been painful for both of you. We thought it best to arrive before it progressed. You had no right, Mark began, but Vesper interrupted gently. We did not alter your timeline, Mark Donovan. We merely shifted ourselves into it at a different point than planned. Your fiancé will not be aware of the pause. Mark looked back at Sarah's frozen form, feeling a surge of protectiveness. Can she hear us? Is she aware at all? No, Lyra assured him. For her, No time will have passed when the shift ends. She will continue her sentence without knowing there was an interruption. Mark took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. I haven't made my decision yet. I still have time. Very little, Vesper said softly. The optimal alignment begins in 27 of your minutes and lasts for approximately 32 of your minutes. We must be aboard our vessel and prepared before it commences. So that's it. I have half an hour to decide whether to abandon my entire life, to leave Sarah standing at the altar tomorrow, to walk away from everything and everyone I know. The choice has always been yours, Lyra reminded him. We have never attempted to coerce you. We have only presented the opportunity and explained what is at stake. Mark looked between the sisters and Sarah's frozen form, the contrast stark and surreal. His familiar, comfortable life personified in the woman he had planned to marry, and the extraordinary, unknown future represented by these beings from another world. If I say no, he asked quietly, what happens to you two? We continue our search, Vesper answered, though our options become increasingly limited as our biological window for the binding narrows. In all probability, we would not find another compatible match before the deterioration begins. And if I say yes, what happens to Sarah? The sisters exchanged a glance. We could ease her transition, Lyra offered. A slight adjustment to her memory and emotional state. Nothing intrusive or harmful, merely a softening of the pain, a redirection of her life path. You'd alter her mind? Mark was appalled at the suggestion. No, Vesper clarified quickly. We would simply provide a subtle, energetic support, similar to what your human therapist might call a resiliency enhancement. She would still experience grief, but would not define or derail her life. She would recover and find happiness again, perhaps sooner than she might otherwise. Mark walked to the window, looking out at the frozen world. A bird hung suspended in mid-flight, a perfect snapshot of freedom. I need to see it again, he said suddenly. The connection we shared. I need to experience it one more time before I decide. There is limited time, Lyra warned. But if it will help you choose, we can establish a brief connection. They stood in a triangle, hands joined. The sensation came more quickly this time. The warmth spreading through his body, the expansion of consciousness, the dissolution of boundaries. The experience was similar to before, but deeper, allowing Mark to perceive even more of the sisters' world, their knowledge, their perspective on reality. He saw the vastness of space not as empty void, but as a living, breathing fabric of interconnected energies. He experienced time not as a linear progression, but as a multidimensional tapestry where past, present, and future existed simultaneously. He felt the subtle vibrations that connected all matter, all consciousness throughout the universe. And he understood, with a clarity that transcended intellectual knowledge, that what they offered him was real. It was evolution, awakening, transcendence. It was stepping from a two-dimensional existence into a multidimensional one, from a limited perception to an expanded awareness that would transform every aspect of his being. As the connection faded and Mark returned to his normal consciousness, he knew what his decision would be. The experience had not taken his free will. In fact, it had enhanced it, allowing him to choose with fuller understanding of what was at stake. He turned to look at Sarah one last time, memorizing her face, sending her a silent farewell and apology for the pain his choice would cause. I'll go with you, he said to Lyra and Vesper. I choose the binding. The sisters' expressions remained serene, but Mark could feel their relief and joy through the residual connection between them. We must leave immediately, Lyra said. The alignment approaches. Can I leave her a note? Mark asked, gesturing to Sarah. Some explanation, even if it can't be the whole truth? Yes, Vesper agreed. But be swift. Mark grabbed a notepad from his desk and began to write, trying to condense everything he felt, everything he wanted Sarah to know, into a few inadequate paragraphs. How could he explain that he loved her still, that his choice wasn't a rejection of her, but an acceptance of something he could not refuse? How could he ask her to forgive him for a decision she could never fully understand? In the end, his note was simple. Sarah, I'm so sorry. There is no way to explain what has happened or why I have to go. Please know that I loved you truly and completely, and that hasn't changed. What's changed is me, or rather, what I understand about myself and my place in the universe. I hope someday you'll find happiness again, with someone who can give you the life you deserve. I hope you'll look up at the stars sometimes and know that somewhere out there, I'm thinking of you. Forgive me if you can. Mark. He placed a note on the coffee table where she would see it when she unfroze, then turned to Lyra and Vesper. I'm ready, he said. They led him from the apartment without looking back. As they crossed the street to the park where their vessel waited, now visible and glowing softly in the gathering darkness, Mark felt a strange mixture of grief and exhilaration. He was leaving behind everything familiar, everyone he loved. But he was moving towards something extraordinary, something few humans would ever experience. At the entrance to the craft, he hesitated briefly, looking back at his apartment building, knowing that when the temporal shift ended, Sarah would unfreeze, would find his note, would feel the pain of his abandonment. We can still make the adjustment we mentioned, Vesper offered gently, sensing his distress. A subtle support to help her through the grief. After a moment, Mark nodded. Yes, please do that for her. Not to take away her feelings, but to help her heal. It will be done, Lyra assured him. The door of the vessel opened, revealing an interior that seemed impossibly larger than the exterior dimensions would allow. Surfaces glowed with soft light, and the air was filled with subtle harmonics. A music felt more than heard. Mark took a deep breath and stepped inside, crossing the threshold from his old life into something new and unknown. As the door sealed behind them, he felt the last tethers to his human existence begin to dissolve. The sisters led him to a circular chamber at the center of the craft, where 3 reclined seats formed a triangle around a central column of swirling light. The walls of the chamber were transparent, offering a view of the earth below as the vessel rose silently into the night sky. The alignment begins in 3 minutes, Lyra said, her voice taking on a ceremonial quality. We will guide you through the process. They helped him settle into one of the seats, which adjusted to conform perfectly to his body. The material was unlike anything he had ever felt, neither solid nor liquid, but something in between, simultaneously supporting and yielding. When the binding begins, Vesper explained, you will experience sensations beyond your current frame of reference. Do not resist them. Allow your consciousness to expand as it did during our practice connections, but without attempting to maintain your usual boundaries. The more fully you surrender to the process, the more complete the binding will be. Mark nodded, his heart racing with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Will it hurt? Not in the way you understand pain, Lyra answered. There will be intensity beyond anything you have experienced, but it is not suffering. It is transformation. The sisters took their positions in the remaining seats, forming the triangle with Mark. The chamber began to fill with a soft, pulsing light that shifted through colors Mark could now perceive beyond the normal human spectrum. The alignment has begun, Vesper said. Are you prepared, Mark Donovan? Mark looked out through the transparent walls at the earth growing smaller below them, at the stars becoming brighter above, at the vast universe opening before him. Somewhere down there, Sarah would be reading his note, feeling her heart break. Somewhere down, there was the life he had planned, the safety of the known, the comfort of routine. But here, right now, was an opportunity to transcend those limitations, to evolve beyond the boundaries of ordinary human existence, to experience realities he had only glimpsed, and to save the lives of these extraordinary beings who had crossed the cosmos to find him. I'm ready, he said, his voice steady. Despite his racing heart, the sisters reached out, each taking one of his hands. The familiar warmth began to spread through him, but now it intensified rapidly, becoming a current of energy that flowed through his entire body. The boundaries of his consciousness began to dissolve, not just expanding as before, but transforming, reshaping themselves into something new and vastly more complex. He was aware of Lyra and Vesper's consciousness merging with his own, not as separate entities joining, but as puzzle pieces finding their proper configuration. Thoughts, memories, perceptions flowed between them, creating patterns of connection that transcended individual identity while somehow enhancing it. The chamber filled with light so intense it would have been blinding to normal human perception, but Mark could see it now as energy patterns, as information, as consciousness made visible. His awareness expanded exponentially, encompassing the vessel, the Earth below, the solar system, the galaxy, until he experienced himself not as a separate being, but as a node in a vast cosmic network of consciousness and energy. Time lost all meaning. The binding might have taken minutes or hours or days. There was no way to measure it within the experience itself. Mark felt himself being unmade and remade, disassembled at the most fundamental level and reconstructed into something greater than the sum of its parts. And then, gradually, the intensity began to subside. His awareness, now vastly expanded, but once again contained within some form of boundaries, returned to the chamber. The light receded to a gentle glow. He became aware of his body again, familiar yet different, as if every cell had been reprogrammed. He opened eyes that now perceived far more than visible light, turning to look at Lyra and Vesper. They appeared transformed, their essence more visible to him now, the energetic patterns that comprised their beings glowing with complex information he could somehow read and understand. And he knew they were seeing the same in him. "It is done," Lyra said, her voice carrying layers of meaning beyond the words. "The binding is complete, and successful beyond our highest projections," Vesper added, her joy radiating as tangible energy. Mark sat up slowly, marveling at how different everything looked, felt, sounded through his enhanced perception. The vessel hummed with life and intelligence he hadn't detected before. The view of space through the transparent walls was now a symphony of energies, fields, and dimensions. "How do you feel?" Lyra asked, studying him carefully. "Reborn," Mark answered, surprised at the resonance in his own voice. "Like I've been living in a dark room all my life, and someone finally turned on the lights. Like I've been deaf, and I can suddenly hear music." He stood, moving with a new grace as his consciousness integrated with his physical form in ways that had been impossible before. He looked down at his hands, seeing not just flesh, but the energy flowing through it, the interconnected patterns that linked him to everything around him. "What happens now?" he asked, turning to the sisters. "Now," Vesper said, rising alongside Lyra, "we can truly begin. The universe awaits, Mark Donovan, and you have been reborn to explore it." Together, they moved to the control chamber of the vessel. Through the view screen, Earth grew smaller as they ascended toward the stars. Mark felt a brief pang of sadness for what he had left behind, for Sarah, for his family, for the simple life he had once valued. But as the ship accelerated beyond the solar system, as new perceptions and abilities continued to unfold within him, as the vastness of the cosmos opened before him with all its wonders now accessible to his transformed consciousness, Mark knew he had made the right choice. He had stepped through a door that few humans would ever encounter, leaving behind the comfortable confines of a limited existence for the boundless potential of an expanded one. Whatever awaited him among the stars, whatever wonders and challenges his new life might bring, he faced them not alone, but bound to Lyra and Vesper in a connection that transcended ordinary understanding. The vessel accelerated to faster-than-light travel, its advanced technology now comprehensible to Mark's enhanced mind. As Earth disappeared from view and unknown worlds beckoned ahead, he embraced his decision fully, without regret. His wedding night had arrived, not as he had planned it, but as the universe had intended. And as the ship carried him toward Astria and all the worlds beyond, Mark Donovan left behind the man he had been and embraced the being he was becoming.